I was reading story from our colleague Chris Cartman over at SunDevilSource.com, and it was about Sam Levitt. And there was a line in there, and I'm not going to quote it word for word. I'm going to paraphrase it. But I thought, okay, that's a segment. Let's talk about that. That's inspiration for a conversation. And basically, the idea that 2025 is either going to show it was a fluke or it was a trend, and that there's no in between those two extremes for ASU. Do you buy that?
I do, because of who their quarterback is. And I'm extremely high on Sam Levitt. Let me be clear, and you can probably see where I'm going with this. I'm extremely high on Sam Levitt. I think that he is one of the best quarterbacks in the country. I think that his name is going to be in the Heisman conversation. I don't know if he's going to be a finalist. We all thought Cam Scattergood. We know the story there.
Yeah.
Like East Coast bias, whatever. The whole deal here, and where I get scared.
Get a bunch of ideas out,
yeah, whatever. Maybe this is like literally inspired by me going on Keaton Slovis's wiki randomly and like looking at his career stats or whatever. But we see this in college football sometimes, where whether it was Jaden Daniels, whether it was Keaton Slovis, a guy sets the world on fire as a freshman, and then he hits a wall and just isn't the same guy since. That's the only way this will happen. That's why I wanted to bring it up. The only way this is just a trend or a fluke, and not a trend, is if Sam Levitt isn't the quarterback that we think that he is. And we do have that trend from time to time in college football where, again, Keaton Slovis had an incredible freshman year at USC, and they thought they had their guy for the next 2 years, and then he just wasn't the same. And we know the story with Jaden Daniels as well, and how his career sort of happened and then went back up after it went down after his freshman year. It's the only thing that comes to mind for me when looking at this. It's not like everyone mentions like the Cam Scattergood thing. It's really not that. For me, it's Levitt, and I guess like we could mention the defense a little bit, but like they should be really good again. So I think that's the only point of fluctuation.
And in case
injuries, I guess,
perhaps. And in case Chris is listening, I don't even think that was the point of his article, and I might have taken his words and twisted them into an idea that I wanted to talk about on the show. So if I'm not trying to twist his words or anything. There was a line in there, and that's kind of how I took it. I kept trying, Kellan, as hard as I could to think of an outcome to the 2025 season where it's something other than a fluke or a trend. And what I mean by that is, okay, they're not as good as they were a year ago, and people will invariably say last year was a fluke. It was a one-year thing. It's what ASU always does. They have that one good year, and they can't follow it up with another one. Or they'll do exactly what they did a year ago. They'll have double-digit wins. They'll win the Big 12. They'll go back to the college football playoffs, and then it's a trend. Is there any outcome, where it's not one of those two extremes? And I can't. If they go 8-4, if they go 9-3, if they get to the Big 12 title game but lose to Iowa State instead of beating Iowa State, or they get to the Big 12 title game and they lose to Baylor, can we say they successfully split the uprights between fluke on one side and trend on the? I guess maybe there's a scenario where it doesn't have to be either or, but it just feels like we have all set ourselves up to believe that this is going to be the year ASU announces its presence with authority, and anything less than that is going to give rise to the idea that last year was a fluke. And I would like to avoid that, but I don't know if it's avoidable or not.
I know some people that cover football when it comes to these types of questions will look this type of stat up and they'll bring it up as a concern. I'm curious if you care about it at all. 6-1 in one-score games. Do you think there's variance there that could come back to bite them a little bit, or do you care about that?
I'd be lying to you if I said I don't look at that as an indicator for flukiness sometimes. Gambo and I did a story about the NFL and about some of the teams. I think Barnwell wrote it about some of the teams in the NFL who might be primed to regress. And it was largely based off of the idea.
7-1, excuse me.
Okay, it was largely based off the idea of how they did in one-score games last year, how there's just a regression. And you know what? I'd be lying to you if I didn't buy some of that, if I didn't believe that sometimes you just get a little lucky or fortunate. You can play your way into that, but sometimes that works against you.
Kansas game really stands out as the one, right? Where like they had no right to really win that game at all. Texas State game was a lot closer than people remembered, and then the mid-third quarter they started to figure some things out.
Do you buy that number? Do you believe in that number as a potential warning sign of
I don't,
flukiness?
just because I feel like the scores can sometimes be misrepresentative. The Kansas State game was not a 24-14 football game. Like, they dominated them so early, and the game was pretty much over from that point on, and then they let their foot off the gas a little bit. I think that the number that gives me confidence with that is just in the back half of the year, especially how they took care of business against Arizona, how much they thrashed Iowa State.
You read my mind. I think any flukiness of ASU a year ago, any one-score flukiness of ASU a year ago, was probably largely confined to the first half of the season, right?
But they should have lost one or two. One of the Kansas or BYU games they should have lost. Like the BYU game especially is one where their hands were completely off the wheel, and it was up to the football gods if they were going to win or lose at that point with the spiral they were going down.
Yeah.
My story with that game, I was actually in Tucson covering the Arizona Duke game to see Cooper Flagg, and I was like, do I want to drive back at the end of the game or halftime? And of course I left at halftime because the game looked over, and then I'm listening to Healy and them and there's people on the field, and it was just
they're on the field, they're off the field, they're waiting to get back on the field, and Kenny's losing his mind.
You're lucky to win one of those types of games. They won both. So there's a little bit of hesitancy from me, but the continuity really helps.
Earlier, we played this or that or whatever it was that we called our game. And if you're going to tell me, what do we call the game? Was that what this or that? Okay. Are we sure that's not taken? Does some other show have that? I don't know.
Now is the time. Snatch it. It is yours.
It is ours. This or that.
I just want like 20% equity in this company. I did my Shark Tank thing there.
If you're going to tell me ASU is going to have a fluke or a trend, I'll pick trend. Okay, I'll say they're going to be trendsetters rather than revealing that last year was a fluke. I think that's the way more likely outcome for a lot of the reasons that you just said with Sam Leavitt and his skill set. Man, the margin for error on this one, anything other than successfully defending your Big 12 title is going to invariably open up to people to say it was a fluke that happened last year. I don't know if that's fair because there's other outcomes where it wouldn't be, but man, anything less than a Big 12 title and a spot in the playoffs, and you might have people saying, see, it was kind of a fluke. They didn't live up to it all.
And we've really spotlighted how balanced and difficult this conference is. Like I mentioned, like the tough games in there. Like what if Houston is like the scrappy team that all of a sudden like puts some things together, which we saw happen for a lot of teams last year. They could go 8-4 in a really tough, balanced, competitive conference, and it could still be a disappointment.
Thanks for watching Burns and Gambo. Click to see more from the guys and hit the button in the middle to subscribe so you never miss a video from Arizona sports.